Here in the United States, death is looked at as something to be afraid of. We cry, we wear black, we mourn, but that isn't necessarily the case for all the cultures around the world. I'm going to give you a little insight into what my family thinks about life after death and our Dia de los Muertos celebrations. Right now you see sugar skulls everywhere. I want to point out right now that Dia de los Muertos is not Mexican Halloween. The two are not associated despite their shelf placement at Target. So before you paint your face as your Halloween costume and run to the bar, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight on why we celebrate that way and how sugar skulls aren't the only important thing for Dia de los Muertos. The celebration holds a lot of significance for people around the world, so it's important that you pay respect to it. I'm going to give you an idea on what Dia de los Muertos is, some of the things we do to celebrate it, the history behind it, and how you can celebrate it respectfully. So what is the Day of the Dead? The Day of the Dead is a Mexican holiday where families can invite their deceased family members back to celebrate with them with food, dance, and music for one day out of the year. History.com editors state that in the article Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, that it's traditionally celebrated in Mexico and by people with Mexican heritage all around the world. It's celebrated from October 31st to November 2nd, with 2 days of significance in that time. November 1st is El Dia de los Inocentes, and this is where children who have passed away come back to see their families. November 2nd, which is All Souls Day, Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos, is where adults come back and celebrate with their families. It's thought that the gates of heaven open up for those 24 hours so the souls can come back earthside. The roots of Day of the Dead go back almost 3,000 years according to that same History.com article. The foundation of Day of the Dead stems from Aztec rituals honoring the dead in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica. The Aztecs believed that the universe was cyclical, so when you die, it's just the next step in your life cycle. It's not an ending to any sort of life cycle. The Aztec gave offerings to their deceased family members, had death rituals, and honored Mitecasihuata, which is the Lady of the Dead, who watches over the bones of your deceased family members. Aztec tradition eventually was combined with Spanish religion, which made Day of the Dead, as stated by Isabel Dorbin in the NPR article Dia de los Muertos Comes to Life, published in 2017. The Spanish colonizers came over and, of course, rejected indigenous beliefs, but took the parts they liked, smashed it in with some Catholicism, and that is how we got our celebrations that we have now. The customs have changed throughout the years, but the foundation still stays the same. The same History.com authors note that during the celebrations, the souls of the dead awaken and return to the living world, where they feast, drink, dance, and play music with their loved ones. The deceased are always looked at as honored guests, according to Sandra Rousey, the author of The History of the Day of the Dead. She explains how family members leave deceased members' photos on their grave sites, as well as their favorite foods, alcoholic drinks, other types of offerings, handmade flowers. These are right from my ofrenda. And they either leave it on grave sites or the ofrendas that they keep in their home, which is the altar where they display these things. They like to help the deceased people celebrate the joys of human life. In an article, The History of the Day of the Dead by Angela Vielba, she explains how the living family members dress as if they are dead, as skulls and skeletons. And the women often dress as La Catrina, which is a cartoon that was created actually to protest how many Mexicans were being forced to adhere to European beauty standards. She's a really well-known symbol of Dia de los Muertos today, and we still use that image as our backdrop for how we dress. Dressing like that kind of pokes fun at death and lets death also know that we aren't afraid of it and it isn't the end and we aren't going to change our lives because of it. Food is another important part of Dia de los Muertos, and some traditional foods we eat will be pan de muertos, which is Day of the Dead bread, sugar skull candy, and other traditional Mexican foods like mole, tamales, pozole, and all of these would be prepared according to that family's traditional recipe. The traditions practiced during Dia de los Muertos are great alternatives to the traditional American way of grieving our family members. You can partake in this beautiful tradition while still respecting that it is a sacred Mexican holiday. Sabrina Barr, the author of It Is Not Mexican Halloween, published in The Independent in October of this year, interviewed Aya de Leon, who gave examples of how you could help celebrate. They want you to learn it from somebody else who is within the culture. Learn about Dia de los Muertos from somebody who celebrates Dia de los Muertos. Visit Mexico. Learn the terms and the language around the holiday. Your level of engagement determines whether you are partaking in appreciation or appropriation. If you're just going to paint your face for a selfie, please don't partake. But if you want to go to a celebration, wear bright colors, dance, listen to the music. We're always welcoming people with open arms. Buy from Mexican artists and not Target. Attend Latinx-run festivals. Shots at the bar with a sugar skull on the poster at the front door is not celebrating Dia de los Muertos. Dia de los Muertos is a beautiful celebration of life after death. It is deeply rooted in Mexican and other Latinx cultures. People dream of seeing their loved ones after they've passed away, and Dia de los Muertos makes that a possibility for so many people. It's comforting to know that death does not have to be the end of that relationship and the end of the soul. And it's not something to fear, but it's something that we celebrate. To many people, death is simply the next step on your journey through the universe. And sometimes that makes the loss of a loved one sting just a little bit less.